Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm joined by Bohdan Yaremenko, a former Ukrainian diplomat and chairman of the board at NGO Maidan of Foreign Affairs. Bohdan, many thanks for joining us.
Hello.
We want to talk to you about Holodomor, the famine in Ukraine, 1932-1933. We've got commemoration events happening this week, this month in Ukraine and around the world. With your experience in the diplomatic service and representing Ukraine around the world, we hoped you might provide some insight on the question of the classification of Holodomor. It's more or less accepted now that it was an act of genocide, at least in academic circles, in the history books, that's how it's described. In the international community, it's not always recognized that way. The United Nations, for example, certainly hasn't given it that label. They call it a tragedy of the Ukrainian people. In your experience, what has the Ukrainian government tried to do to get it seen as genocide, and what's the response? What was the response like?
From my perspective, this is not the matter for Ukrainians, the matter of classification, the matter of words. Genocide or the tragedy, the big tragedy or the larger tragedy. So this is an attempt to say the truth about our history. Because during the Soviet times, we were not allowed to speak about Holodomor. So it was prohibited, strictly prohibited, under the threat of persecution. So anyone who would be trying even to provide, to lay out some light on the situation during the 30s would be called traitor, would be put in the prison, or even called insane. So it was the need for the nation to explain herself to the outer world. And even and it's not, you see, a surprise for me that we started a larger campaign of Holodomor recognition just some 15 years only after proclaiming or gaining back our independence. So because of all those restrictions on the truth about Holodomor, the restrictions on the researches, on the discussions of that issue, so we were completely unaware ourselves of this truth. And it came to us as the huge shock and surprise to the whole nation what has happened with us and what did the Bolsheviks and the Stalin regime did for us. So at the time we matured enough as the nation, as the new country in Europe, we decided that it's time for us to explain what was happening here, and not just to gain some sympathy, but also to send a signal to the outer world what has happened because of the lack of democracy, because of the lack of the humanity. It happened during the first years of the presidency of President Mr. Yushchenko that Ukrainian government has decided to start a large international campaign.
And so this all came, this is like a part of state building, of building the nation, right? You have to build a culture,
correct.
You have to build a history.
Correct. It's one of the stones in the basement of the Ukrainian statehoodness, of Ukrainian historical knowledge, in the process of self-determination ourselves as the nation, because we were not allowed to do this for decades, or basically for centuries during, to develop ourselves as a nation during the period of Russian Empire. So there was no conditions for free development of this country and this nation. So yes, and we decided to start to spread the knowledge. Of course, it was difficult at the beginning because the people, quite honestly, not just in the governments, were not prepared to accept the truth about the tragedy of such a scale, especially about the tragedy that happened some decades ago, that's not happening right now.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a problem, isn't it? Because you're trying to spread the truth, but what happens when that truth is, in fact, itself essentially contested? So you want to build the nation and you want to express yourself as an independent country, but these cornerstones that you want to build it on are themselves, perhaps even in this country at that time, and even now, there's not absolute agreement on what happened. And so when you're trying to spread this message, it doesn't come through clearly.
You see, I don't think that it's right to say that there is no public consensus in this country of what has happened there. There are discussions of the number of victims, and some pro-Russian, politically motivated politicians, not scientists or researchers, are trying to present the situation that the Holodomor, the famine, has happened not as the result of the artificial or centralized policy of the government, but just of the lack of the products or food, nutrition, or the bad harvest.
And this was a version of events which came back to the forefront under Yanukovych. Is that correct? That's the president before current regime?
You see, I was expecting at the time that Yanukovych was elected as the president. Quite honestly, I was expecting that he will prohibit any discussions on the issue, and I was surprised to see that it has never happened. Basically, yes, what has happened that the government has decided to decrease the activity a little bit, the level of activities, international activities. It's probably because Yanukovych was trying to build up the relations with Russia, and Russia has always been quite negative about this campaign, and it's probably one of the reasons of the fact that you mentioned that UN has never recognized Holodomor as the genocide, because we know that, let's say, for UN Security Council, Russia has the veto right. Also, for their General Assembly session, you should gain 2/3 of the votes, and it's always difficult when one of the larger countries are trying to oppose this. So it's more technical issue than moral or whatever it is. The campaign of researching the Holodomor has never stopped during Yanukovych time. So, and I believe it is already a consensus in this country.
I mean, it's a positive sign. I mean, under a pro-Russian government, even then, this, like you say, the work on Holodomor continued. I mean, that's a positive sign.
And not just the scientific work. So you see that there are already a number of monuments here for the victims of Holodomor, and it was a sign that the governmental delegations and also the president was continuing to, let's say, to participate in the ceremonies of commemorating the Holodomor victims near those monuments, to bring international and foreign delegations to also to pay tribute to those victims. So basically it's already a custom and tradition in Ukraine to pay tribute for the victims of this Holodomor. So it's becoming, I'm sure that it's already has become the part of Ukrainian history and Ukrainian tradition, even diplomatic and or protocol tradition, to commemorate the victims of Holodomor. So I believe on this side we are, it's already been done. So and discussions are minor, especially in the line of the recent changes in Ukrainian criminal code, which provides that that is punishable under Ukrainian law to say that Holocaust or Holodomor has never happened. So
similar, it's like Holocaust denial in Germany, for example. That's
yes, and I believe it's also the way of explaining ourselves to the outer world, that we are not just talking about ourselves. We're talking about the way that the government could affect the people, could punish them, could prosecute them. So for us, all genocides, all tragedies of this scale are of the same importance. So yes, we're really putting the sign of equal between Holodomor and Holocaust.
Yes, I mean, I think that's an interesting direction, and I mean, in a way, you could argue that that is only right and only fair, that the world should see Holodomor on the same level, and actions being taken in this country to do that are moving in the right direction. But I mean, for other countries, when they see this, is it not difficult to present it to them as something other than a political project? I mean, they could easily see this as a political football. Under different regimes in Ukraine, it takes on different significance, sometimes as a nationalist agenda, sometimes a pro-Russian agenda. But actually, how do you convince them that this is just an adherence to the political facts? And this is actually in line with European values, in line with what's happened with the Holocaust.
See, I was participating in the campaign of international recognition of Holodomor as Consul General of Ukraine in Edinburgh in Scotland. And this really wasn't a political campaign for me. What we were doing, so besides of different kind of presentations, seminars that we provided for the politicians, for public in Scotland, we were arranging quite an interesting things. Let's say we gathered a very interesting troupe of Ukrainian composer, Icelandic choreographer, Scottish dancers, and they even created the performance dedicated to Holodomor. So they were explaining the truth about Holodomor by the means of dance.
And I think we're just almost out of time here. And so I wonder then, is that the way that we need to move now, or that Ukraine needs to move, and to get this issue out of the political, move it in more, and find new responses in art, in literature, in the wider culture? I mean, in the same way that you could argue that the Holocaust has become now. I mean, the political facts are set in stone, and now what we have a continuous response to that through art and literature and culture. And is that now where we need to go?
Well, for us, it will stay as a tragedy, and we will be commemorating it as long as Ukraine will stay and Ukrainians will continue their lives as the nation. And I believe the Holodomor will stay not only as the part of our memory, but also as an important lesson for the whole humankind. So I believe there is a need to promote the knowledge of the tragedies of this kind. There will be no situation. I cannot imagine a situation that it would be better for humankind to forget about Holocaust, Holodomor, or atrocities of this kind. So I believe we should keep trying. Probably yes, it becoming less and less important for us as we see more and more recognition. I mean, the political part of it. So to receive some recognition on the part of the parliaments, city councils, governments, but on the level of their human context, the context between the people, it's something we will be promoting as long as Ukraine will stay as the country.
All right. Well, many thanks for a very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
You've been watching Ukraine Today. I've been joined by Bohdan Yaremenko, a former Ukrainian diplomat, now chairman of the board at NGO Maidan of Foreign Affairs. We've been discussing Holodomor, the famine in Ukraine, 1932 to 1933. Commemoration events are ongoing. That's all we have time for today. Join us again next time.